I found 2 white marks by a back door and chose silence. Tonight, that silence will split a family and hand me justice. I quit chasing her footprints and taught the floor to remember. If a line of chalk can steer a marriage, who's steering the chalk? I step into the cold room first. The compressor drones like a distant engine underwater. Breath fogs in front of me, quick and shallow. Metal bites the air with a tin taste. My fingers skim the concrete, rough as old sandpaper. This is where I start the story, not at a wedding photo, not at a promise whispered over cake and candles. Here, where the air nips and the lights hum, where truth keeps better than meat. Outside the loading door, dawn bruises the sky. I picture the Elenero, wet, smelling of brine. Seagulls scrape the quiet with rusty cries. On that threshold I saw them the first time. 2 short strokes, white and stubborn. Chalk, careless as a child's game. Not mine. Not random either. They appeared, vanished, then returned again. Most people would scrub and move on. Stared until my eyes felt salt-burned. Patterns talk when you stop interrupting them. The marks showed up before certain nights. They faded after certain deliveries. They ghosted the corner where pallets rest. Coincidence begs to be believed. I have learned not to beg. My chest thumped a slow, hard drum, kept my hands still against that door. Heat rose under my jacket. Anger warms colder than any heater, yet anger undirected only fogs the glass. I needed edges, not steam. So I did what engineers do. I mapped the noise and waited for the signal. I logged times without speaking a word, bill receipts, traffic cameras, open docs. I let the city keep my receipts for me. The hum of the freezer trained my patience. In that hum, I sorted chaos into columns. Columns leaned toward conclusions. Conclusions leaned toward a plan. The plan needed a stage, and I had one. Every sound in this place is a metronome. Fans whir, shelves tick as metal cools. Farther out, a forklift coughs awake. I note each beat without looking at a watch. My body knows when the alley brightens. It knows when the chalk usually appears. It knows when footsteps soften, pretending innocence. I do not touch her phone. I do not plant a keylogger in the dark. I do not hack what I can't outthink. If I accuse, she denies. If I demand, she performs regret. Performances fool crowds, not physics. Concrete tells the truth with dust. Dust keeps secrets until light hits low, so I give the dust a job. I test a theory with a simple rule. When the marks return, I mark something else. I shift my schedule by a hair's breadth. I rearrange my mornings into sharpened knives. I pass the door without pausing, eyes forward. I walk like a man with nothing to check. I leave the checking to the floor. The chill leaks through my sleeves. Goose flesh beads along my forearms. Memory beads too, but slower, heavier. Her laugh at a family party, bright and quick. Her hand on my shoulder, brief and businesslike. The slow drift from warmth to weather report. Apologies issued like receipts with the wrong total. Everyone says seasons change. No one mentions the wind inside your rib cage. I let the wind blow and do not chase it. It rattles the shelving like anxious teeth. I anchor myself by counting vents. 1 over the loading bay. 2 above the produce shelf. 3 near the busted thermostat. Anchors do not win races. Anchors keep ships from drifting into rocks. If you were me, what would you do? Would you pound on doors and demand confessions? Would you trail a phone across the map? Or would you wait until the map trailed itself? I choose the last path because it hurts less twice. Once now, once later, in the right direction. Waiting is not weakness, it's sharpening. Sharpening feels like hunger inside the lungs. I feed that hunger with details, not fantasies. I count deliveries, not rumors. I listen to compressors, not excuses. The hum says keep going. The floor says keep quiet. I picture the alley again. Puddles mirror a thin slice of sunrise. A gull hops, proud of a stolen crust. A van slows near the dock, then creeps on. Every city has this same corner. Every corner holds a ritual someone swears is harmless. Harmless rituals break bones you cannot x-ray. Mine sit right behind my sternum, 2 chalk lines. They live in my head like tombstones, short, unadorned, hard to ignore once you see them. I want to scrub them until my knuckles split. Instead, I memorize their height, their slant, their dust. I memorize the tiny chip in the concrete edge. I give my memory a ruler and let it measure. Open loops keep me moving forward. Who set those lines down? Who taught them to mean it's clear? Why do they vanish on certain Tuesdays? Why do they brighten after heavy rain? Questions stack like crates. Crates carry weight better than hearts. I load them carefully and keep the aisle clear. My breath steadies. The drone softens into background weather. I am not the storm today. I am the barometer. Numbers rise and fall, telling me when to leave. I will leave exactly when the marks reappear. I will not be seen leaving. I have learned how to be present like a shadow. Justice does not break down the door. It waits behind it with a ledger. When pages align, doors open on their own. I can already feel the hinge loosen. I can hear a screw vibrate under stress. Small sounds predict big failures. I have built a career on that truth. Now I will build my exit on it too. At the end of this part, nothing explodes. No plates shatter, no neighbors stare. Only a man in a cold room, learning the language of chalk. Only a plan that tastes like copper in winter. It's only a promise I make to the version of me that stayed. He deserves an ending with air and sunlight. He deserves a win no one can spin. So I wait for those lines to return. I let the floor keep my secret. When the time is right, the door will open. Someone will learn chalk never meant love. It only ever meant timing, and my timing is almost perfect. My life looked neat on paper. The margins told otherwise. If calendars could talk, mine would whisper where loyalty went missing. I live by schedules and stacked receipts. Morning coffee, commute by the harbor road, a list that hums like a well-tuned fan. Order tames noise. Noise, in return, hides trouble in plain sight. Our house sits near the waterline. Salt hangs in the curtains by afternoon. Gulls patrol the rooftops like anxious sentries. I used to love their racket. It sounded like home and bread and payday. Lately it sounds like someone laughing behind my back. Maya's freelancing grew after spring tax season. More books to reconcile. More invoices to chase. She said family needs help at the restaurant. I nodded, grateful we could contribute. Helping family carries interest rates you never see. We ran on different shifts and thin patience. She worked late with spreadsheets and codes. I tuned servers, then tuned myself to silence. We crossed in hallways like commuters underground, shoulder brush, a promise to catch up later. Later kept drifting farther down the week. I keep expenses in neat envelopes by month. June looked fine until it didn't. A string of gas charges set off a bell. Same pump, same station. Always at 9:52 at night. 2 miles from the restaurant's backlot. 2 miles is nothing when you're honest. 2 miles is a lifetime when you're not. My chest tightened, then leveled out. I scanned more statements, searching for a pattern. The dates lined up with vendor deliveries, numbers stacked into a shape I didn't like. I felt heat climb my neck, then fade. I wrote the times down. I wrote them down again, slower. Days later I noticed something smaller. The coat smelled different after certain nights. Not perfume, not soap. A thin, dry scent that felt carpenter clean. Cedar, I realized, the way knife blocks smell new. I pictured a hand resting on fresh wood. Not mine. I held that thought until it stopped burning. I told myself kitchens collect odd smells. Fish, citrus, bleach, garlic, smoke. Cedar belongs to knives, not to people. But smells clung for reasons they do not explain. I filed it under wait and watch. That folder grew heavy quietly. Her phone habits changed like tides. She locked the notes app with a gesture. She set the lock again, even after 2 seconds. Security matters. I respect that without complaint or snooping. Still, my stomach pinched at the new ritual. We both worked with numbers and deadlines. Trust used to carry the routine without squeaking. Nights stretched longer. A glow from her laptop cut the bedroom thin. I watched shadows crawl across the ceiling. They looked like tally marks without meaning. I counted them anyway. Counting calms what anger inflames. The restaurant's family tree spreads like ivy. Uncles, cousins, godparents, neighbors, by marriage. Every branch claims history, pride, and unpaid favors. Maya said they were drowning in receipts. They needed someone precise and tireless. She is both. She thrives when confronting chaos that fears columns. I wanted to believe that was all. Work calling, family business gasping for order. My hope, reliable as a cheap umbrella, kept tearing. I held it over my head anyway. It whistled in the wind between buildings. One afternoon, small talk turned awkward shapes. She mentioned an inventory overhaul. She said new systems would end the nightly scramble. She didn't meet my eyes long. I felt a draft pass through my ribs. A draft like a door cracked open in winter. I studied her avatars across apps out of habit. She rotated the same 3 photos for years. Now, the switch happened on vendor days only. A sandbar shows when the tide retreats. That's how it felt. Something old suddenly visible. I wrote those dates next to the gas charges. Columns started leaning toward each other. I stood in our kitchen that Saturday. Sunlight slid through blinds and broke into bars. Dust rose like soft snowfall around the sink. I gripped the counter until my palms cooled. Anger wants spectacle. I wanted evidence. Evidence doesn't shout. It whispers until you lean down to listen. A message popped on a workboard about supply issues. I clicked, then unclicked, then stared at nothing. I heard Maya moving down the hall. Footsteps light, confident, tired at the edges. My heart tapped faster, then steadied. I waited for the cedar again. Oh, it didn't come that time, which bothered me more. If you were me, would you confront or calculate? Would you gamble on a confession? Or would you build a scaffold strong enough to climb? I chose the scaffold. Scaffolds are ugly until they save your life. I checked my car's maintenance log for no reason. Habit finds proof, where fear just finds fog. Mileage matched the nights I didn't sleep. I circled each match with a dull pencil, the paper scuffed like skin under rope. At the harbor, evening painted the water nickel gray. Tugs rumbled and shouldered barges into place. Their horns rolled across the bay like tired thunder. I leaned on the railing and counted wakes. Each one smacked the pillar, then shivered out. That rhythm described our house perfectly. Impact, shiver, silence, repeat. Always at 9:52 at night. 2 miles from the restaurant's backlot. 2 miles is nothing when you're honest. 2 miles is a lifetime when you're not. My chest tightened, then leveled out. I scanned more statements, searching for a pattern. The dates lined up with vendor deliveries, numbers stacked into a shape I didn't like. I felt heat climb my neck, then fade. I wrote the times down. I wrote them down again, slower. Days later, I noticed something smaller. The coat smelled different after certain nights. Not perfume, not soap. A thin, dry scent that felt carpenter clean. Cedar, I realized, the way knife blocks smell new. I pictured a hand resting on fresh wood. Not mine. I held that thought until it stopped burning. I told myself kitchens collect odd smells. Fish, citrus, bleach, garlic, smoke. Cedar belongs to knives, not to people. But smells clung for reasons they do not explain. I filed it under wait and watch. That folder grew heavy quietly. Her phone habits changed like tides. She locked the notes app with a gesture. She set the lock again, even after 2 seconds. Security matters. I respect that without complaint or snooping. Still, my stomach pinched at the new ritual. We both worked with numbers and deadlines. Trust used to carry the routine without squeaking. Nights stretched longer. A glow from her laptop cut the bedroom thin. I watched shadows crawl across the ceiling. They looked like tally marks without meaning. I counted them anyway. Counting calms what anger inflames. The restaurant's family tree spreads like ivy. Uncles, cousins, godparents, neighbors, by marriage. Every branch claims history, pride, and unpaid favors. Maya said they were drowning in receipts. They needed someone precise and tireless. She is both. She thrives when confronting chaos that fears columns. I wanted to believe that was all. Work calling, family business gasping for order. My hope, reliable as a cheap umbrella, kept tearing. I held it over my head anyway. It whistled in the wind between buildings. One afternoon, small talk turned awkward shapes. She mentioned an inventory overhaul. She said new systems would end the nightly scramble. She didn't meet my eyes long. I felt a draft pass through my ribs. A draft like a door cracked open in winter. I studied her avatars across apps out of habit. She rotated the same 3 photos for years. Now, the switch happened on vendor days only. A sandbar shows when the tide retreats. That's how it felt. Something old suddenly visible. I wrote those dates next to the gas charges. Columns started leaning toward each other. I stood in our kitchen that Saturday. Sunlight slid through blinds and broke into bars. Dust rose like soft snowfall around the sink. I gripped the counter until my palms cooled. Anger wants spectacle. I wanted evidence. Evidence doesn't shout. It whispers until you lean down to listen. A message popped on a workboard about supply issues. I clicked, then unclicked, then stared at nothing. I heard Maya moving down the hall. Footsteps light, confident, tired at the edges. My heart tapped faster, then steadied. I waited for the cedar again. Oh, it didn't come that time, which bothered me more. If you were me, would you confront or calculate? Would you gamble on a confession? Or would you build a scaffold strong enough to climb? I chose the scaffold. Scaffolds are ugly until they save your life. I checked my car's maintenance log for no reason. Habit finds proof, where fear just finds fog. Mileage matched the nights I didn't sleep. I circled each match with a dull pencil. The paper scuffed like skin under rope. At the harbor, evening painted the water nickel gray. Tugs rumbled and shouldered barges into place. Their horns rolled across the bay like tired thunder. I leaned on the railing and counted wakes. Each one smacked the pillar, then shivered out. That rhythm described our house perfectly. Impact, shiver, silence, repeat. I drove past the restaurant without stopping. Back alley lights hummed a sodium buzz. Damp cardboard leaned against the dumpster crookedly. The door I needed faced the service lane, clean, scraped, dented near the bottom hinge. The concrete step carried shoe scuffs and salt lines. I saw no chalk that night. Only the ghost of the shape my mind expected. Expectation is a dangerous electrician. It wires false light into dark rooms. I shut the engine, then started it again. No one needs to see me parked and staring. Staring can be louder than shouting. I went home by the long way. Streetlights cut the road into tidy squares. I drove through each square like a test I might fail. My jaw ached from clenching against questions. I let my teeth part and tasted copper. Stress tastes like a coin you can't spit out. The next week, I gathered smaller threads. Mislabeled envelope on the hall table. A mileage note that canceled itself. A stain shaped like a blade on a dish towel. None of these prove anything alone. Together they hum like aligned gears. Aligned gears move weight you cannot budge alone.
Ow.
Then the first chalk returned. I found it at dawn after a sleepless loop. It's a short lines, low and steady, fresh and blunt. A child could have drawn them. A professional would have too. They sat on the concrete like a quiet dare. I felt my pulse climb my throat, then settle. Not shocked, recognition. A ritual had restarted without me. I didn't touch them. I didn't photograph them. I memorized the slant and the powder spread. I felt grit gather under my nails anyway. Something in me stood up straighter. Something else sagged and asked for mercy. Here is where routine finished lying. I finally told the truth in chalk, dust, and timing. I turned away before someone turned the corner. I carried the pattern home in my mouth like salt. I placed it on the page beside gas and avatars. The shape was undeniable now. The shape wanted me angry and reckless. I chose patient and sharp instead. If you were here, would you still believe coincidence? Would you call me paranoid? Would you call this care or cruelty? I call it preparation. Preparation is mercy in a different tense. 2 chalk lines became my metronome. They told me when to wake early and walk past. They told me when to swallow questions whole. They told me the door has 2 faces, front and back. I planned for both without anyone noticing. The house slept. The harbor rolled. The marks waited for their meaning to arrive. Waited for mine. 1 breath longer. I slid my schedule by a hair, and the map blinked. If fate hides in habits, what happens when I rearrange mine? I woke before the alarm and didn't hit snooze. 5 a.m. Felt like a locked room with wet air. The house held its breath as I tied my shoes. Boards creaked like cautious steps in a museum. I counted to 3 before the front latch clicked. Silence pushed back, then let me pass. I ran the harbor road with the fisherman's headlights. Cold air needled my lungs, sharp and clean. Liesel and brine mixed into a hard flavor. My feet drummed a steady pattern on the pier. I wasn't chasing health, I was chasing timing. Habits leave fingerprints on clocks. Move your routine an inch, and shadows misalign. I logged my old route on an app I trust. Then I carved a new route through darker streets. Porch lights blinked like slow warnings. Somewhere a dog complained and then gave up. Back home, I set a tiny sensor on our back door. Not a camera, not a mic. A coin-sized disc that hears vibration. A nudge wakes it. A hinge groan records the time. No faces, no audio. Only numbers, which don't blush or lie. I labeled the device like labeling feelings. Plain, dry, nothing to see here. The log fed my inbox without ceremony. Timestamps stacked like vertebrae. They would hold a spine when I needed one. I made coffee slow to keep my hands steady. The mug warmed my fingers, then cooled too fast. Sunlight barged in through the blinds and split the counter. Dust swirled like soft static. My chest settled into a tame beat. Patience learned to sit at my table and wait. After work, I turned to ledgers that weren't mine. Public records, traffic schedules, delivery windows. Most systems leak a little light at the edges. I traced those leaks with an accountant's eye. Numbers aren't cold. They burn when they don't add up. The restaurant's vendors posted pickup slots online. Some were honest. Some were aspirational. I copied them anyway and built a grid. A grid makes noise decide where to sit. Noise hates sitting still. Invoice numbers formed a pattern with smug confidence, repeating pairs, then a gap, then a leap. It mimicked birthdays until it didn't. I mapped the leaps onto a calendar of chalk. Leaps landed near marks more often than chance. Chance left the room without saying goodbye. At lunch, I drove the long way past the car wash. Its camera watched the alley with bored loyalty. I asked for archival stills the legal way. Forms, fees, a shrug from a manager who'd seen worse. The printer coughed out grainy frames like tired birds. Rain streaks. Headlights. A familiar silhouette at the wrong hour. I didn't trust a single photo. I never do. I trusted sequences. Sequences tell you when a lie runs out of breath. The frames lined up with my grid. My grid hummed like a fridge behind a wall. Night came with the cedar again. Faint, clean, too careful to be casual. I felt it before I named it. Naming made it heavier. I boxed the feeling and slid the box to the back. I checked the sensor log at our door. Blinked at times I didn't expect. A nudge when I was running. A nudge when she was finishing invoices. Nudges always mean hands, or wind, or both. That night, the wind was asleep. If you were me, would you ask for explanations? Would you settle for weather as a witness? I settled for the log and kept breathing. I started carrying small chalk in my pocket. Not to write. To remember. Weight matters, even when it's nothing. It reminded me to watch the ground, not faces. Faces charm. Ground testifies. I checked the restaurant's trash schedule without shame. Collection happens at a hum the city knows by heart. On certain mornings, bags looked lighter, not less waste, better sorting. Better sorting hides the wrong kind of paper. I took notes. Then I took my notes apart and put them back. I drove by a kitchen supply outlet on the edge of town, window display. Knives glittering like frozen lightning. Inside, steel smelled like a clean hospital. Clerks wheeled boxes, hands quick and bored. A receipt bin near the register overflowed. Printed thermal strips curled like pale snakes. I didn't dig. I don't steal evidence. I asked about engraving lead times and kept my smile small. The answer fit a date in my grid too neatly. Back home, I opened a drawer and breathed once. Her gift list sat where it always sits. A recent purchase had been replaced by a newer entry. The old line had a faint crease, like pressure from a pen. Initials hiding creases until light hits right. I imagined a blade with a single letter near the heel. One curve, one point. A mark that says a gift deserves a name. Imagined a hand weighing balance at the counter, not mine. Imagination is a dangerous cameraman. I ordered it away and went back to math. I sat with my grid until my back throbbed. I sipped water that tasted like metal pipes. The hum of my own fridge echoed the cold room's drone. It's a world singing the same low note. They began to sink in my head. When two different songs match tempo, you pay attention. I tested my schedule shift again at dawn. Different route. Different clock. Same harbor, bruised and loyal. The boats coughed awake. A gull scolded the wind and won. Sweat salted my mouth and sharpened my thoughts. Running turned fear into friction I could hold. On the third morning, my inbox pinged mid-stride. The sensor logged a nudge I couldn't cause. My breath clipped, then recovered. 5 minutes later, I passed the restaurant alley. Two chalk lines stared back with morning confidence. Fresh dust clung to the step like frost. I didn't stop. Stopping says you belong to the scene. I let the image burn into me and kept moving. My calves ached with the effort not to turn. Restraint leaves a sweeter bruise than rage. I kept that bruise like a lucky coin. After shower and coffee, I drew the alley by memory, angles, cracks. The chip near the lower hinge, I marked where the chalk sat relative to the door seam. Then I added the time, the wind, the moisture. Moisture matters. Dust loves certain weather. I opened a fresh page and wrote one sentence. I stopped hunting proof. I built a trap. Traps need bait, timing, and a silent trigger. I had timing. I understood silence. I needed bait that looked like me and didn't. The plan formed in ordinary words: shift one meeting, swap a route, leave a thing where a thing shouldn't be, make the floor believe a new story, make a watcher misread it on purpose. Misread can be engineered if you honor a routine. If you were here, would you risk the long game? Would you accept the ache of patience? Or would you bang the table and call it closure? I wanted closure. I chose leverage first. I printed a calendar with no labels, only dots where events should breathe. Green for deliveries, blue for chalk, red for door nudges. Gray for nights that swallowed sound, colors layered like storm radar. The storm rotated around one simple center. Its very secret expects to be caught by emotion. This one would be caught by inertia. Objects in motion prefer to stay in motion. So do people doing the wrong thing. I would give them the lane and watch the speed. Check my pockets before bed that night. Wallet, keys, tiny chalk, smooth as a worry stone. I set it on the dresser and listened to the house. Pipes settled like old men easing into chairs. The wind traced the siding with patient fingers. My heartbeat matched the fridge again, low and steady. I slept without dreams, but with directions. Morning would test the scaffolding I built, not with fireworks. The tiny tremors only the logs could feel. A hinge protesting, step brushing powder, a routine swallowing bait without tasting metal. If nothing moved, I would move. If something moved, I would move smarter. The city rolled into its day as I closed my eyes. Forklifts, coffee grinders. Gulls arguing about nothing. Somewhere a knife met wood and left a shallow groove. Somewhere two lines waited to mean something new. I would be there when they did, 1 minute early. Planted a reflection that wasn't mine. When suspicion finally turned, it didn't ask for permission. I started small because small tilts the big pieces. A pair of kitchen gloves, stiff with broth and steam. I folded them once and set them in my trunk. Not hidden. Not displayed. Placed like a thought I might forget on purpose. Steam has a way of staying even when it can't be seen. The gloves carried that restaurant smell into my quiet car. Bones, bay leaf, a hint of peppercorn. It's comforting to innocent people, incriminating to anyone who wants to be fooled. I cracked a window and let the city test me. I shifted my routine by 1 more minute, left a grocery list that didn't match our pantry. Stopped at a supply store I never use. Walked out with a small roll of parchment sleeves. Nothing dramatic, nothing illegal, nothing loud, just bright crumbs on a clean counter. I changed shirts at the gym even when I hadn't lifted. Tossed the clean one into the back seat, careless and quick. Let it catch a whisper of the glove's cooked perfume. Smell right stories faster than hands can erase them. I gave the air a pen and asked it to improvise. That night I logged the alley. Chalk, faint and newly smudged toward the step. Dust dragged by the toe of a shoe, small and hurried. Oh. Someone had checked the door with more nerves than skill. I felt that recognition tighten under my ribs. Attention was moving in the direction I needed. At home, I set my keys where metal sings on wood. A thin ring of sound slid across the room and faded. I counted to 5 before taking my jacket off. Cedar rose, then failed, then ghosted back. My skin prickled, then smoothed. Patience is a muscle. Mine no longer shakes. She watched me from the edge of our hallway, not speaking, not asking, counting too, most likely. My bag sat open on purpose, not an invitation. Just a stage prop glaring under normal light. I showered slower than necessary, gave the house time to breathe and make decisions. Water hammered my shoulders until thoughts fell quiet. I pictured those gloves cooling in the trunk. I pictured someone discovering them and writing their own script. A script where I played the role I refused to audition for. If you were me, would you pull the brakes now? Would you confess to nothing just to calm a storm? Or would you let a storm reveal which trees will snap? Routine carried us through morning without words. Coffee, inbox, a sink that refused to drain fast enough. Her eyes tracked my hands like a camera on a crane. I kept my hands slow, easy, even. I let the lens record what it wanted. I left the house right on time. Not a second fast, not a second late. The sensor at our back door logged a soft tremor. Later, the log would tell me the hinge complained twice. 2 touches, when 1 would suffice. Curiosity likes to double-check its own heartbeat. At lunch, I drove past the restaurant and didn't blink. The alley coughed up a trash bag with a clean tear. Inside, a receipt peeked out, wet but legible. Vendor line items matched my grid like teeth in a gear. Gear teeth don't lie. They shred if you force them. This set turned smoothly enough to be practiced. That afternoon, an email reached the wrong inbox on purpose. Health inspection tips, accept anonymous whispers like dry leaves. Complaint read like a checklist with a grudge. Not my words, not my timing. But the rhythm matched the family's fear of outside rules. Inspections do not sprint. They stroll with polite menace. Everyone smiles. Everyone sweats. Floors shine a shade too bright. Sinks run and run as if flushing away memory. I kept my distance and watched the calendar, not the faces. The next evening, I left a gym towel in the passenger footwell. Salt dried on the surface in faint constellations. I nudged the gloves so the towel corner grazed them. Just enough to carry a hint of stock and onion. Suggestion. A rumor that never needed a mouth. Windows reflect more than they reveal. In the glass, I saw a version of me who had something to hide. Jaw set, eyes calm in a way that isn't kind. I held that image long enough to dislike it. Dislike is useful. It keeps me from becoming what I pretend. Back home, I found a new order in small objects. It's a misplaced mug, a folded receipt on my desk that I hadn't folded, a drawer closed a little to flush. Houses touch back when you push them. Ain felt like a stagehand, resetting props between scenes. Night wore cedar again, faint but deliberate. I let it pass through me like a cold front. No questions, no bait. No lecture about what trust used to mean. Lectures fill time that evidence needs more. If you were me, would you address a shadow directly? Would you name the shape and accept the echo? Or would you let the echo wander until it found its source? On Wednesday, the inspection parked at the alley, Van Door's side. Clipboards snapped to attention. Kitchen staff moved with choreographed panic. Someone had practiced looking innocent in a mirror. Mirrors throw lies back at an unflattering angle. I walked past on my break with a paper cup of coffee. Steam lifted and broke in the wind like thin flags. The chalk was gone, scrubbed into a pale cloud. Erasing isn't the same as undoing. Concrete remembers pressure, even when powder is wiped. That same day, a call from a vendor hiccuped into voicemail. Scheduling confusion, inventory mismatch, note about paperwork redirecting to a different desk, kind of polite tangle that strangles slowly. I saved it and said nothing to anyone. Tightened my own loop by one more notch, ran earlier. Drove a block I usually avoided. Watched the streetlights blink to their morning mode. My inbox pinged again. Another door tremor, too early for deliveries. Patterns feel hypnotic when they unmask themselves. The gloves did their quiet work. So did the towel and the parchment sleeves. So did the shirt that smelled like a kitchen I didn't visit. Together, they told a story anyone nervous could believe. Belief is a bridge people build to escape their own lies. I stood on my side and watched the traffic. That evening, the house grew bright in the wrong places. Lights on in rooms where no one sat, drawers aligned as if measured with a ruler. Her posture sharpened, then softened, then sharpened again. She hovered near my bag as if passing through weather. I set the bag down and walked to the sink. Metal groaned, a low animal sound, then went quiet. The alley gifted me another clue the next morning. A narrow smear just above where chalk used to sit, not lines. Sweep as if a shoe scuffed while turning back. Second thoughts leave different marks than plans. I photographed nothing and memorized everything. Inspection returned for a follow-up faster than expected. Second, visits carry fewer smiles and more pens. Staff lowered voices to a hush that fooled no one. The family tree rustled at the edges, leaves looking for a breeze to blame, roots pretending not to notice the shovel. Emails inside the restaurant pinged across the wrong screens, schedules shuffled. A private thread mentioned a clean break from old workflows. Old workflows do not break, they calcify. Something or someone had started chipping them apart. By Friday, the mirror I'd built did what mirrors do. It offered a choice: adjust the mask or see the face. She chose adjustment, at least for now, locking apps twice, setting her phone face down on soft surfaces, as if glass bruises when it looks too long. I cleaned my trunk and left the gloves right where they were, even stacked a grocery bag on top like a curtain. Nothing screams like something almost hidden. Her gaze measured the car longer than usual that night. My pulse stayed level, a metronome I could conduct. If you were me, would you feel guilty for engineering doubt? Would you worry the mirror might cut the wrong person? I worried and kept going anyway. Underdogs don't win by being the noblest in the room. We win by being the most precise. Late that night, I opened my notebook and changed headings. From observation to leverage. From chance to clockwork. I drew a thin box around Saturday. Wrote one word in the center. Bait. Under it, 3 smaller words. Time. Smell. Absence. The trap wasn't about catching her in a scene. It was about catching the whole machine that made the scene possible. The chalk, the nudges, paperwork that bent around convenience. When the machine stalls, everyone inside hears the belt squeal. I closed the notebook and listened to the house breathe. Somewhere outside, a truck shifted gears and grumbled uphill. Somewhere nearer, a floorboard sighed under careful feet. Shadows slid over the hall like ink in water. I didn't move. Mirrors work best when the subject thinks they're alone. By morning, my calendar had a new rhythm. Inspection follow-up, delivery offset, family meeting I wouldn't attend. And me, a minute early, everywhere, like a rumor with legs. The mirror stood where I placed it. All that remained was to see who flinched first. Reputation marched in uniforms. Truth showed up in work boots. If loyalty is loud, why does it whisper when the ledger turns red? The inspection's second visit left a chill on the alley. Floors gleamed like ice rinks no one trusted. Pans hung at attention, edges too bright to be honest. I stood half a block away and felt the air taste metallic. That taste means someone polished guilt and called it clean. The family convened inside like a court without statutes. Names tied to names, favors braided into obligations. I could picture shoulders squared, hands folded too tight, dynasty of recipes trying to rewrite math. Math refuses to learn new traditions. I followed the money because money never follows me back. Vendor lists, tax IDs, drop-off times that tried to hide behind traffic. The grid on my table grew teeth. Teeth bite down when numbers clench. Shipment caught my eye on a sleepy Tuesday. Crates logged as premium catch, weight generous enough to feed a wedding, but the invoice wore a mask. A distributor I didn't recognize one town over, with a name that sounded like fog. Shell companies are polite thieves. They hold the door open while your balance walks out. I traced the name through state filings. The address belonged to an office that rents itself by the hour. No dock, no freezer, no hand truck ever scraped those floors. A ghost selling fish to a kitchen that swore it knew the ocean personally. If you were me, would you call it fraud or family ingenuity? Would you shrug and say everyone does it? Or would you circle the date and underline it twice? I circled and underlined until the pen bit the paper. Then I mapped the ghost company's appearances. They showed up when chalk felt freshest. They vanished when inspectors hovered near. That rhythm made my scalp tighten. Crimes often worship calendars more than gods. Late afternoon, I parked 2 blocks away and walked. The alley breathed bleach and bravado. A driver rolled a pallet jack toward the door with practiced boredom. Cardboard sighed. Plastic wrap crackled like a nervous laugh. The back door stuck a beat before opening, the hinge protesting truth. I wasn't there to play hero. Heroes burn hot and early. I was there to listen to machinery misfire. Inside, metal clanged, then hushed to fast. Hushing in kitchens is like foghorns at sea. You hear what's missing more than what remains. I pulled back and took the long route past the car wash. The camera's angle loved me that week. Stills lined up on my passenger seat like a quiet jury. Same van. New decals that looked printed yesterday. Decals don't smell like fish. They smell like plastic and fear. Back home, I opened a folder I didn't want to open. Insurance policies sit heavy even when they are thin. This one had my name where it shouldn't have mattered. Amounts that pretend to be practical. Dates that pretended to be random. The beneficiary line hardened my jaw into stone. I stood very still and stared at the ceiling vent. Air whispered through the slats like a warning I had already heard. Hands cold. Neck hot. Heartbeat refusing the tempo I asked for. I let the wave pass without surfing it. Did I imagine the worst because hurt loves shortcuts? Did I build a scaffold just to climb a rumor? I set the pages down and pressed the edges square. Paper lies flatter than people. It still slices if you rush. I rewound to my principle. No accusations without a spine. The spine was almost built, but almost breaks under weight, so I served myself a glass of tap water and tasted coins again. Coins in winter.
Ow.
My anger wanted to take the wheel. I handed it a map and said follow, don't lead. Next morning, the inspection returned with fewer pleasantries. Clipboards clicked. Thermometers slid into meet with clinical mercy. Voices dropped an octave that says the audience is outside. Through the front window, faces rearranged into concern-shaped masks. Masks do not breathe well. People perspire secrets under them. The family tree shook as messages flew. Cousins pinged a group thread full of weather and recipes. Weather as in forecasts of consequences. Recipes as in who mixes what with whom to keep the sauce from breaking. I watched the timestamps march like soldiers. Orders barked without verbs, nouns dragging pride across a tiled floor. I kept my role, the shadow that takes notes. The sensor at our back door tattled again at odd minutes. A hand on the latch when mine was miles away, then a second touch 10 minutes later. Curiosity always returns to confirm its own courage. I drove to the state records office during lunch. Fluorescent lights did what fluorescents do. Drained color and patience with equal talent. I requested a stack of bland truths, receipts for filing fees, registered agents, changes of ownership. Bland truths crush theatrical lies with boring gravity. The ghost distributor had changed hands last quarter. The new signer shared a last name that sat at our table every holiday. If you were me, would you laugh or grind your teeth? Would you feel relieved by the predictability? Predictable treachery still empties bank accounts. I walked out into harsh daylight and let it scald my eyelids. The sun does not negotiate. My shadow fell sharp and loyal across the sidewalk. I wanted that loyalty inside the house, too. Loyalty requires air. My house felt airtight lately. Evening brought a whisper in the alley that wasn't wind. Forklifts whined, then paused. Someone cursed under a breath I refused to quote. The smell turned from bleach to panic. Panic smells like metal warming too fast. It bends rails you thought were permanent. The follow-up report landed in my inbox by morning. Not a smoking gun. A list of expectations unmet. Sinks too slow, logs incomplete. Temperatures flirting with danger. Death by checklist, postponed by promises. The family convened again, louder this time. I didn't need a seat to hear how it would sound. History invoked, sacrifice paraded. Suspicion passed around like bread. Someone would volunteer a scapegoat to feed the ritual. Scapegoats buy quiet. They rarely buy change. I sharpened my plan to a single point. Make the machine show itself in public, not scandal. Calibration. Forced the gears to mesh where witnesses could hear. That means shipments that can't explain their paperwork. That means paperwork that can't explain its signatures. It means timing that exposes hands. I watched for the next delivery from the fog-named vendor. It came dressed as confidence. The driver rolled up with posture borrowed from veterans. The pallet film wrapped tighter than truth during a toast. I walked past it adrift, counting heartbeats. Door opens, pallet shifts. A smear of white where chalk once lived. The van's plate reflected in a rain puddle. I read it backward, then forward, then wrote it down. Back at the car wash, I bought a new batch of stills. Plate, decal. A face half hidden by a cap with a family logo. Bloodlines love shortcuts more than streets do. I assembled everything on my kitchen table. Grid photos, policy, state filings with their sleepy fonts. The table felt heavier under history. A family business is a church for people who don't like pews. They pray to habits and call it honor. Night fell, and the house listened for my decision. I moved quietly so my choice could grow without fear. The plan needed 3 simple pushes. Expose the shell's timing to an outsider, isolate one link in the chain during the next drop, and let the inspection schedule overlap like tide on tide. I sent a message to the one outsider who measures tides for a living. Not a friend. Not an enemy. A bookkeeper who hates sloppy zeros more than I hate betrayal. I asked nothing loud, just pointed at a number that wore the wrong shoes. Numbers trip in daylight, others start watching the pavement. I set alarms that belonged to other people's phones. One for the car wash manager who liked forms, one for the city hotline that logs complaints like weather, one for my own patience so it wouldn't sprint and fall. Before sleeping, I opened the insurance folder again. I read my own name until it lost meaning. Then I read the beneficiary line until it found too much. My throat tightened, then loosened out of stubbornness. I am not a payout. I am a person who can count to 10 without breaking anything. If you were me, would you confront now and end the ache? Or would you stay one step wide? Let the machine grind itself apart. I chose the grind. Machines resent the hand, not the law of motion. Let motion do the screaming. By sunrise, the harbor wore its nickel-gray armor again. Gulls argued like unpaid consultants. Tugs shoved patience into place with low groans. I ran the pier and matched my breath to heavy engines. Every exhale filed me sharper. Every inhale cooled the blade. The family would close ranks around a story. I would open a ledger around a fact. Ranks impress crowds. Ledgers impressed judges, managers, and bank accounts. Today the ledgers would start speaking out loud. The machine that ate loyalty would cough in front of witnesses. I tightened my laces and headed for the day's first hinge. The chalk had gone quiet again. Quiet never means safe in a system this nervous. Quiet means pressure. Pressure means metal remembering it was or before it was a door. I touched the frame once and felt a faint tremor. The building knew something was coming. So did I. I mailed truth in fragments to force a family to talk. When puzzle pieces fought for meaning, alliances snapped first. I needed a lever that didn't look like a lever. Noise would warn them. Quiet would bury them. So I asked numbers to whisper to someone who hates errors, not a lawyer. A forensic mind that counts like a metronome. I met that mind on paper, not in person. Credentials neat, questions tidier. I fed them dates without names and gaps without drama. They returned patterns I already feared, round trips that never reached the dock. Invoices billed to a room with no floor drains, signatures laid down by a wrist that practiced family trees. My lungs cooled as if I had stepped into wind. Fear sharpens, then steadies, when math stops lying. I wrote a list titled Bait and kept it small. Time, smell, absence. Time to catch hands reaching for shortcuts. Smell, to salt the air with familiar guilt. Absence, to let their story fill the stage. I vacated. I packed 3 envelopes with care that felt like surgery. Each held a USB and a printed report. Each report carried a hole the others could fill. One showed vendor timing that kissed the chalk's return. One mapped signatures to filings and addresses without drains. One compared temperatures to logs that forgot to exist, sealed them slow so doubt could hear itself breathe. The labels went to 3 different ties on the same trunk. an aunt who manages cash with iron fingers, a cousin who inventories panic along with produce, kitchen manager who trusts receipts more than neighbors. I added no letter, only a sticky note with the same line. Compare this with what they sent you. If you were me, would you fear the blowback? Would you worry the wrong person takes the heat? I worried and mailed them anyway. Sunlight soaked the envelopes as they slid away. They looked harmless in a clerk's bin. Harmless things tip kingdoms over. I left my house with the quiet of someone uninvited. Keys in my pocket, calendar cleared of anything explainable. I walked past our back door like it belonged to strangers. The sensor accepted the lie and recorded nothing. Nothing is a data point when you expect a tremor. At the harbor, cranes swung their arms like sleepy giants. Steel cables hummed low, a note too big for throats. My shoes scraped salt that refused to melt. I matched my breath to the machinery and waited. Waiting is heavy until momentum notices you. By mid-morning, my phone ticked with the first reaction. It's not a message to me. A calendar change I could see from far away. His family had called a systems check that afternoon. Systems checks are prayers dressed as meetings. They ask God to love spreadsheets. I bought coffee and sat where I could count vans. Delivery windows slid. Managers improvised concern. I watched one cousin jog toward the alley like a courier of dread. He carried a manila folder under his arm like a spare rib. Inside, ghosts jostled for space and recognition. My bait needed smell too. I laid that line without touching their kitchen. At noon, I looped past a supply outlet and walked out empty-handed. The clerk's bell rang with a cheap ring that stuck to the ear. Back home, I left parchment sleeves in the sink on purpose, just damp enough to carry a whisper of stock. Absence would explain the rest. She returned early, stiff in the shoulders, eyes scanning edges. Her gaze brushed the sleeves, then jumped to my face and away. I felt heat climb, then learned from it. I offered no story. Stories feed hungry questions. Hunger works for me today. Throne brought a tremor across my map. One envelope landed with the aunt. She dialed old numbers. Another hit the manager. He paced a neat groove into rubber mats. Somewhere, a printer rattled off pages with my grid's bones. Rattling printers sound like small animals trapped behind drywall. That sound makes leaders overuse the word now. If you were me, would you step inside and steer? Would you reveal the fourth piece and call it finished? I stayed outside and let gravity do its job. Pieces crave each other when meaning knocks. They would meet without me, precisely because of me. By evening, my inbox carried a copy of an inspection reminder. Follow up sooner than anyone wanted to pronounce. Polite language, hard date. Same week as a scheduled drop from the fog-named vendor. Calendars can be bribed, but not easily, twice. This time, the bribe would arrive late. I set my alarm for an hour, the goals still own. Sleep came as numbers drifting into place. Chalk, plate, piling policy. I stacked them in my head until they stopped wobbling. Somewhere in that stack, a hinge loosened on its own.
Morning.
Split the sky with a slice of tin. I ran the pier, calves taut, breath clipped to even counts. Sweat salted my lips. The taste said keep the pace. When I finished, I let the shower drum thinking out of my shoulders. Then I put the tiny chalk in my pocket and didn't use it. I only needed its weight. The meeting at the restaurant started before lunch. I saw the cluster through the front glass, bodies drawn tight, chairs at angles that mean nobody plans to stay still. Papers shuffled. Voices moved low and fast. Events stood like a lighthouse that lost electricity. Scanned for threats, then tried to look bored. Bored men overcorrect when they feel cornered. The envelopes had done their quiet violence. I could see it in the way hands gripped clipboards, the way eyes hovered at doorways instead of faces. The aunt held a USB like it might leak. The manager kept touching the same empty pocket. Cousins flinched at the ding of the kitchen timer. Fear hears bells deeper than sound allows. I didn't go in. I had mailed my voice already. The fourth piece waited at home inside a labeled drive timecode from the car wash. Kangles the alley had told me in confidence. A map of chalk to window to van to plate. I would hold it until the tide hit the dock just right. Smell arrived before lunch. Cedar again, cleaned and careful. threaded with stress. My hands itched to scrub it off the air. I let it settle instead. Not because I enjoyed it, because evidence chooses the patient. At our back door, the sensor finally told a story without stuttering. Touch, pause, touch again. A rhythm of someone both sure and unsure. The hinge moaned like a small animal rolled in sleep. I logged the time without emotion and folded the moment away. If you were me, would you be cruel enough to smile? Would you celebrate a feeling you wouldn't wish on anyone? I didn't smile. I stood still and listened to a house refuse to lie for anyone. After lunch, the city's complaint line logged an anonymous note. I didn't send it. I didn't need to. Attention had moved beyond me and into daylight. Daylight is an honest bully. It shoves without apology. Fog-named vendor rescheduled, then unrescheduled, then stalled. Stalling exposes gears you pretend aren't there. Every delay stirred, more risks toward more phones. I watched from a strip of shade across the street. Their van arrived later than nerves would have liked. Decas looked new again, a different font, trying a different alibi. Fonts don't clean fish either. Inside, bodies arranged themselves into ranks, then broke formation. The aunt slid a paper toward Evan with a finger that had no tremor. The manager pointed at a column and blinked too slow. Two cousins stared at each other like mirrors that didn't agree. I pictured the USBS sinking in someone's head. 3 fragments with a shared ache. A 4th fragment they didn't know existed yet. I went home and set the drive on the table. Next to it, the policy with my name. Beside that, the filing printouts with their sleepy fonts. I placed a blank envelope on top and wrote a single line. Timecode doesn't get nervous. I didn't seal it. Not yet. Inspection would need to walk in first. Their clipboards would sound different the 3rd time. Less scratching. More underlining. Underlines make people confess to the wrong person if you wait. Evening laid copper light across my walls. Dust glowed like a warning I could almost read. I leaned both hands on the table and counted to 8. Anger rose, then remembered its job was to keep me exact. Exactness tastes like cold metal and clear water. I drank both and felt the day snap into place. If you were me, would you feel like a villain? Would you fear becoming what you're fighting? I checked my reflection in the dark window and looked away. Villains crave the mirror. I prefer instruments. Night carried voices through drywall, even with windows shut, tight, urgent, then stretched thin. Words I didn't repeat in my head, only the weight of them. Weight leaves shapes on the air. Those shapes matched the outline of a machine about to seize. I set 2 alarms I wouldn't sleep through. One for the follow-up. One for the delivery window they could no longer juggle. Then I stood in the doorway of our bedroom and measured silence. Silence measured me back and found no tremor. Tomorrow, the envelopes would finish their work. Tides would overlap. A van would arrive into a calendar that stopped bending. Clipboards would find their underlines. And my 4th piece would make the rest click loud enough for strangers. I placed the drive in the envelope and pressed the flap down halfway. Not sealed, not sent. Ready? Preparation is mercy in the right hands. I am trying to keep mine steady. I didn't attend the celebration. I adjusted the lighting. When truth stepped into the spotlight, it read from my script. The anniversary banners went up before noon. Gold letters sagged slightly in humid air. Tables wore white cloth like polite armor. Photos of founders lined the wall like stern ancestors. I watched from across the street and felt my pulse flatten. Absence is a tool when presence would blur the line. Inside, a string quartet tuned the room into civility. The notes sounded clean and nervous at once. Glasses chimed as staff rehearsed gratitude for later. Back alley doors exhaled bleach and optimism. Optimism wears cologne when it wants investors to notice. I counted vans and waited for clocks to collide. The drive sat sealed now in my jacket. Time code, angles, plate numbers, chalk chronology. Evidence that doesn't argue when voices rise. I didn't plan to wave it like a flag. I planned to let it hum under everything. Hum enough, and the chandelier starts to tremble. If you were me, would you step through the front door? Would you make eye contact and wait for theatrics? I chose the alley, then chose distance, then chose trust in motion. The fog-named vendor arrived later than the posted window. The van breathed heat through a dull grill. Decals shone with a shine-only printer's cell. A pallet rolled toward the dock like a confession on wheels. Plastic wrap clung so tight the boxes looked strangled. The back door hesitated, hinge groaning the way liars groan. I stayed where the car wash camera could love me. Far enough to be forgettable, close enough to read a face under a cap. Evan paced the threshold, arms folded with forced patience. He wore celebration clothes that didn't believe him. Confidence sours fast when paperwork can't keep up. Inside, the quartet slipped into the family songbook. World standards warmed the air and softened edges. Laughter lifted, then stumbled, then pretended not to. Toasts rehearsed themselves behind napkins and phones. I pictured the aunt guarding a ledger like a saint. I pictured the manager counting plates like a rosary. Then the other clock chimed. Inspector's car eased in with civic calm. No siren, no swagger, just a clipboard with last week's underlines. It's underlines that like overlapping with delivery schedules. Two tides met on that concrete step. One tide brought boxes with a fog address. The other brought pens that don't believe fog. I felt the air change like a room shrinking. Staff scattered, then arranged themselves into explanations. Explanations line up faster than forks at a buffet. I walked along the sidewalk as if late for nothing. Through the front windows, I saw history smiling. Founders in frames blessed the proceedings without blinking. The string quartet paused on the edge of a cadence. Silence grew rich and awkward. Silence makes small lies sound like cymbals. The aunt moved first, the way iron moves. She led someone toward the office with a tight elbow. The manager followed with a folder hugging his ribs. Evan stayed by the dock, checking his phone too often. People touch glass when they wish it were wood. Wood forgives pressure, glass reflects it. Let the inspector and the pallet share the stage. Thermometer slid, pen scratched, eyebrows cooled. A seal on a box lifted with more effort than dignity. Inside, labels argued with each other in cheap fonts. Temperature logs stared back with empty squares. Empty squares shout louder than angry paragraphs. If you were me, would you hand over the drive now? Would you enjoy the sting of immediate victory? I waited because waiting raises the waterline on truth. A cousin sprinted through the dining room and vanished backstage. Guests watched without names for what they sensed. Polite concern floated in the space between forks and lips. Champagne paused just short of celebration. The quartet restarted with smiles that trembled. Music is brave until paperwork wins. I stepped into the office corridor at the edge of the bustle. The air smelled like printer ink and lemon cleaner. Voices overlapped and trimmed themselves mid-sentence. On the desk, 3 USBs sat in a cracked glass dish. My handwriting looked back from 3 sticky notes. Compare this with what they sent you. The aunt looked at me like a question that weighs a lot. I placed my envelope on the desk without sound. No speech, no flourish. Just the heft of plastic and paper together. Timecode doesn't get nervous. That line, in ink, settled the room into a colder shape. She slid the drive to the manager, whose mouth ignored breathing. He loaded the files with hands that wanted to shake. Screens bloomed with gray footage and dashed timestamps. Angles nested into each other like migrating birds. Van, plate, chalk, and early light. Door tremor logged from my back step. Vendor schedule kissing an inspection reminder. Kisses can incriminate more than lip prints. In the alley, a raised voice, and then a hush, not a shout. A drop in volume that means someone forgot how to stand. Evan's posture lost its lighthouse. He turned to face 2 clipboards that didn't blink. I heard the pen click that always changes a life. Inside, the founders on the wall kept smiling for strangers. Guests murmured about timing and tradition and weather. Forks hesitated above plates that cooled too fast. The quartet played something easy to remember. Someone near the bar wiped an invisible spill. I stood still and let the screens keep talking. The manager pressed pause, then rewind, then pause again. He traced a wheel track with the cursor like a vein. The aunt read the filing printout and didn't blink once. Her finger stopped on a last name we both knew. Roots connect to trunks, even when trunks pretend innocence. If you were me, would you feel pity or relief? Would you offer mercy or let the machine confess? Mercy without admission only fertilizes rot. The inspector asked for access. Nobody wanted to grant. Access arrived anyway, because badges have their own gravity. They followed the boxes deeper than the public ever sees. Thermometers retook the same journey, colder this time. The camera flashed where cameras shouldn't belong. Cameras belong exactly where secrets insist they don't. The dining room tried to resume its script. Toast rose, wobbled, then sat back down. A child laughed because children don't read rooms. A cousin stared at the ceiling as if reading star charts. Two elders consulted tradition and found it stubbornly silent. Tradition can't consign a fraudulent invoice. Back at the desk, the last file opened. A composite shot stitched chalk to van to plate to time. Slow zoom on powder, catching morning light, play pause. Frame advance over a shoe turning back. Second thoughts caught in dust, as permanent as ink. The aunt nodded once, as if completing prayer. She closed the laptop carefully, like setting a small animal down. Her jaw unclenched into something harder than anger. Choice lives there, where rage would feel good but fail. She stepped out to the hallway and called for the manager. Not loud, not gentle. Final. I moved before anyone asked me to explain. My part was finished. Tide met tide, and the dock held. Outside, the harbor wore a late sun like hammered copper. Gulls spiraled on air they didn't earn. A tugboat shoved a barge into obedience. Metal groaned with satisfaction you feel in your teeth. If you were me, would you stay to watch them apologize? Would you collect the credit like tips at closing? I chose the door and the street and the ordinary sky. Behind me, a clatter of pans bit the air, not rage, recalibration, a machine shedding a bent gear. Someone would claim it was always broken. Someone else would whisper that no one listened. I walked the long block to where the car wash camera couldn't see. The envelope felt lighter now, used up on purpose. I slid it into my jacket pocket and let my shoulders drop. Breath came deeper than it had in months. Soreness unknotted at the base of my skull. Justice feels less like fireworks than good posture. The celebration limped on without its myth. People ate because people eat. Music carried a smile it didn't believe. Founders watched from frames that outlived their recipes. Somewhere in the back, someone signed a form. Forms move faster than forgiveness. I reached our street as lights clicked from gold to white. Windows glowed in polite rectangles across the block. Our door looked like a door again, not a threat. The sensor would log one more entry tonight. Mine and only mine. My hands warmed on the knob like people warm on truth after denial. The house breathed, and this time it matched me. Tomorrow would bring meetings and messages and explanations. Tomorrow would label scapegoats and salvage plans. Tomorrow would ask me to confirm what they already knew. I would confirm what mattered and ignore performance. Underdogs win by finishing the race, not by sprinting the last 10 steps. I set my keys down without the ring of drama. The kitchen settled around me like a loyal animal. Water ran clear and cold and tasted like nothing at all. Nothing at all is the flavor of peace when you've lived on iron. I leaned against the counter and felt my ribs rise evenly. The plan had ended exactly where it began, at a door with chalk and a choice to let silence work. If you were me, would you finally sleep? Would you forgive the part of yourself that waited this long? I turned off the light and let the room go dark. In the dark, I could still see two white lines. They no longer meant secrecy or swagger. They meant schedule, proof, release. They meant my story had turned a corner without breaking. Mercy and leverage sat side by side on my table. If justice is choice, which hand do you use to open it? Morning arrived with a hush I trusted. No alarms I didn't set. No hinge whispering twice. Light came thin through the blinds, cutting the counter into stripes. Coffee bloomed dark and honest in the mug. I stood still until my breath found a steady lane. The restaurant woke into a different animal. Schedules shrank. Deliveries paused. Phones learned new manners. Family that spoke in thunder now practiced inside voices. Inside voices reveal more than shouts when paper is involved. My inbox carried official politeness. Follow-ups. Requests for clarification. A soft storm of CCs and timestamps. None of them asked how I slept. They asked for the footage link and a copy of the grid. Truth is more contagious than rumor when it comes with attachments. If you were me, would you savor this quiet? Would you feel the wind in your shoulders? I felt something better. Room to decide? I laid 2 envelopes on the table like compass points. The first held a clean path, separation terms with numbers that breathe, no courtroom theater, no speeches about history, just a ledger that knows where dollars sleep at night. The second held the heavy option, contest everything and let discovery open every cabinet. Every cabinet hides dust you forgot to fear. I wrote 1 word on each flap to keep my mind honest. Cooperate. Contest. Both tasted like metal when I said them in my head. Metal is good. Metal holds shape under heat. The house carried a faint smell of lemon from last night. Sun warmed it into something kinder. I wiped the counter without needing to. Motion calmed the animal that lives behind my ribs. The animal doesn't roar today. It watches, tail still, eyes clear. Footsteps approached in a rhythm I recognized. Measured, tired, careful with the middle of the floorboards that squeak. A bag settled somewhere too lightly. Keys kissed wood in a small apology to the air. No words, just the weight of a person trying not to crack. I didn't turn it first. I let the house register to lives in 1 room again. Silence filled with things that used to be easy. Chalk, cedar, ledgers, me. I pushed the first envelope forward by an inch, then the second. Not a test. A map with 2 roads the size of hands. 1 road ends in cooperation. 1 road ends in a file cabinet throwing up its ghosts. Air moved through the vent like a careful instrument. My chest tracked it and stayed even. Across the room, a body shifted. Shoulders sank. Hands gripped the chair back too long. Gravity wrote its note on the posture of someone out of bargaining chips. Confessions don't need volume, they need oxygen. The room gave both without asking permission. I heard a breath that started to form a reason and then quit. Reasons don't matter when timelines do. Timelines already spoke under fluorescent lights and cold sensors. If you were me, would you offer comfort? Would you explain what went unsaid? Comfort heals when the wound belongs to both. This one doesn't. I kept my voice inside my skull and let paper stand in for me. I tapped the envelope marked Cooperate and slid it 1/2 inch closer. It contained a fair split, a workable calendar, a promise to stop bleeding good years. It was not mercy. It was design. Design leaves everyone standing when the movie ends. The other envelope stayed put, heavy with the appetite of a grinder. Court schedules, affidavits, subpoenas that knock while children do homework. I could live there and win. I could lose months I want to earn back, inch by inch, with clean sleep. I felt a heat bloom near my collarbones and held my ground. The animal behind my ribs stayed quiet. We had hunted enough. Now we sort. I left the room and let the decision meet the table alone. In the hallway mirror, I looked older and lighter. Justice adds lines and then erases a different kind. I washed my hands not for cleanliness, but for ritual. Water cooled the leftover adrenaline into something usable. When I returned, 1 envelope had moved. Cooperate sat closer to the edge, as if it wanted air. Contest waited like a tool you only use when walls catch fire. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. My face belonged to a person who pays bills on time and tells the truth on forms. I opened the envelope marked Cooperate and set out the terms. Numbers, dates, a plan for splitting furniture without splitting anyone's spine, support where it counts, distance where it saves lives. Pen where a pen belongs. Across from me, shoulders dropped a little more. Some truths arrived in small pieces. Jealousy dressed up as attention, validation masquerading as loyalty, work turning into a hiding place that flattered the worst parts. I cataloged them the way I catalog receipts, not for drama, for accuracy. If you were me, would you pick at those pieces? Would you demand moral footnotes? Footnotes dilute what needs to be signed. We dated papers where papers needed dates. We left blanks for lawyers to fill with their steady wrists. We spared the house new echoes. The animal in my chest stretched and yawned. It wanted sleep more than it wanted triumph. That felt like evolution. News traveled through the restaurant like steam. Doors opened and closed with unfamiliar gravity. Evan disappeared from a schedule that printed his name in bold. Vans changed routes like birds change seasons. The ants' hands kept their iron. The ledger got a new spine. In my inbox, a message from the inspector landed like a brick with a bow. Corrective actions accepted. Monitoring increased. Timelines visible in public. Public sunlight makes private mildew rethink its career. I took a run at dusk to let the day drain properly. The harbor glowed nickel, then steel, then something close to silver. Tugs grumbled like elders satisfied by a settlement. My breath went in on 4 counts, out on 4. Feet on wood, wood on pilings, pilings in water, water holding all of it up. Systems nested and honest. At home, I opened a closet that had learned to be a vault. I removed a box labeled for a future I finally believed in. Inside, a pair of running shoes that still smelled like factory. I laced them without superstition. Air moved clean through the room. A small ache pulsed under my left shoulder blade. Not pain. Proof that muscles record what minds try to skip. I lay on the floor and let breath iron the knot flat. Ceiling shadows slid like slow rivers. My body stopped bracing for doors. If you were me, would you forgive yourself for taking this long? Would you forgive yourself for the mirror you built? Forgiveness gestures toward the past. I wanted direction for the next mile. Nothing sentimental. A simple confirmation that systems would be audited on a regular cadence. They replied with a thumbs up made of pixels. Cold, efficient, perfect. I set a reminder to cancel a policy with my name pointing the wrong way. The calendar accepted the task without commentary. I poured water into a glass and watched a bubble climb the inside like a tiny diver. The bubble reached the surface and disappeared into the room. Some things vanish correctly. The house sounded like a house again. Fridge low note. Wind lifting a corner of the mail. A neighbor's door thudding in a human rhythm. No sensors chirping at wrong times. No chalk where chalk shouldn't be. I took the tiny piece of chalk from my pocket and held it in my palm. It had ridden there through plans and pivots and a tide that never learned my name. I walked to the bin and let it fall into coffee grounds and orange peels. White vanished under ordinary waste. Sound was nothing. The meaning was everything. The next morning I jogged before the gulls began their arguments. Air came cold and instructive. Docs hummed a note that fit my step. I passed the alley and did not look down. Concrete kept its secrets. I kept mine no longer. If you were me, what would you do with this clean space? Would you rush to fill it with noise? Would you guard it like a tide pool that needs time to reset? I chose guarding. I chose meals that tasted like themselves. I chose calls that didn't ask me to be a witness. I chose sleep that arrived like a friendly wait. 2 envelopes had started a new ledger in my life. Not just money. Time. Attention. Peace. The underdog had a balance again. Not large enough. Justice didn't throw confetti. It handed me a broom and a key. I took both and locked the right doors. Then I swept. The lines on the floor belonged to no one but sunlight. Light kept them, I let it. I didn't need revenge fireworks. Needed a key that fit. When the lock turned, the room already felt like mine. Morning met me at the pier with a clean edge. Water wore a sheet of light that moved like breath. Gulls sketched lazy arcs to board to argue yet. Engines muttered low, the kind of sound you feel in your knees. I ran until my thoughts stacked in neat rows. In, out, no alarms. No alarms. Only wood, water, air. The shoes in the box molded to my stride. Fresh foam answered each footfall with quiet respect. I counted pilings and let the numbers keep time. For in, for out. Lungs open like windows finally unstuck. I passed the alley and didn't tilt my head. Concrete can keep its biography. I'm done editing it. If you were me, would you check the sensor just once more? Would you hunt for tremors the house no longer makes? I left the app closed and boiled water for eggs. Steam fogged the small kitchen window and then cleared. Sun fell across the counter and made every scratch honest. Honesty looks better in daylight than any showroom finish. News traveled without my voice. A schedule posted with new names. Policy canceled with a click and a sigh. A vendor retired itself from polite conversation. Evan did what men like him do when light gets personal. He ran toward a horizon with his back to the ledger. Ledgers don't. They found him 2 towns over trying to start over with a lighter story. Stories weigh what they weigh, no matter who tells them. At home, the 2 envelopes became paperwork and then became air. Signatures dried. Dates settled into calendars that didn't blink. I walked room to room with a small box and chose what stays. Mugs that fit my hand. Towels that don't pretend to be softer than they are. A photograph where my smile touches my eyes. Everything else turned into charity or quiet. I texted the bookkeeper 2 words. Audit scheduled. They sent back a checkmark that felt like a handshake. Systems matter more than villains. Systems keep the next underdog from bleeding out. I visited the harbor at dusk because I could. Light shifted from nickel to copper to something close to grace. Tugs shoved tonight into place with a grunt that sounded satisfied. Salt rode the wind and made my tongue honest. I thought about the old me, the one who begged coincidence to behave. He did his best with a smaller map. He gets credit and a hug I only know how to give by running. If you were me, would you call what happened forgiveness? Would you name it distance and leave it unframed? I choose distance. Forgiveness will show up if it wants a job later. For now, space pays better. At a light, a couple argued softly about nothing that mattered. Their hands still found each other without asking. I wished them boredom of the good kind. Boredom that means you can taste your coffee and hear your fridge hum. My fridge hummed all evening like a reliable bass note. Under it, I could finally hear the smaller music I missed. Paper settling, vents sighing, the neighbor's dog stretching in sleep. I opened a notebook I almost threw away. Pages crowded with grids, arrows, small angers. I flipped to a clean sheet and drew a single line. Not 2, not chalk. A horizon I get to move toward. I wrote 3 words under it. Run, build, rest. A plan shouldn't outshine the life it protects. Night sharpened the city's edges and then sanded them down. A freighter called out on the water, long and low. I turned out the kitchen light and watched the window become a dark mirror. The face looking back didn't require translation. Tired, yes. Carved thinner in places where life had pressed too long. But mine, fully mine. The phone buzzed with a polite ping. A final note from a supervisor who now loved checklists. Actions taken. Monitoring, ongoing. No need for further materials. Thank you for your cooperation. I set the phone face down and let gratitude be a quiet thing. If you were me, would you keep a souvenir? A glove? A scrap of tape? Grain of white powder in a jar? I kept nothing. Souvenirs drag the past into rooms that need fresh air. I opened the window instead. Sleep arrived, like a patient friend, not a prison guard. I lay on my side and let breath find its groove. Somewhere outside, a car door thudded with human weight. Somewhere nearer, a pipe ticked as it cooled. My chest rose without argument. I didn't rehearse any speeches in the dark. Morning again. Shoes, keys, a wallet that finally holds only what I use. The door closed behind me with a sound that felt finished, not final. Streetlights yawned out. Gulls took the shift. I jogged past the place where 2 lines used to mean everything. Mean maintenance now. Good. Let maintenance have them. If you were me, what would you do with your new bandwidth? A class. A trip. A fence mended with a neighbor who offers his ladder. I start smaller. A clean desk. And a long call with someone who roots for me. Rooting matters. Turns survival into living. The harbor's surface flexed and flashed like scales. Kid dropped a pebble and squealed at the ripples. Ripples touched pilings that will outlast both of us. I smiled without checking who saw. Small joy is the best witness. At home, I brewed coffee and watched the pour darken. No rush, no bargain. Just heat meeting water, water meeting bean. I took the first sip and tasted exactly what I made. No cedar, no metal. Small, ordinary victory that didn't need applause. If you were me, would you write a last line to the old chapter? I did, but only in my head. It wasn't clever or cruel. It was simple. I'm here. I'm okay. I'm going forward.